What's up, Diablo 4 Barbarians? So, this is going to be one of the top tier builds for Season 5. As of right now, the Barbarian has always been pretty much one of the best classes, and if you're looking for pretty much the top tier build for 99% of the player base, there's nothing that feels better than the Whirlwind Barbarian. It is so incredibly good, and even with the most recent update that we recently got, which did technically nerf our hemorrhage, it's still actually stronger than it was before, and that's because we have a bunch of new toys to go ahead and play with. So one of the newer additions to this build that is actually super strong in Season 5 is we're getting a brand new aspect called the anger management. And what that allows you to do is build this build super easy. So what this allows you to do is while you're above 40 fury, which you'll see that we're at pretty much maximum the whole time. It fluctuates between like 98% to 100% fury at all times. But you lose 2 fury per second, so there's technically kind of a downside, right? It doesn't really matter for this build at all because we don't really need to have some sort of giant spender for fury, and on top of that we have a bunch of uniques that will make this build even better. So the bar to entry with this build was a little bit harder before because you needed pretty good cooldown reduction, and that is because you needed to be able to constantly keep up your shouts. It's how you kept up your berserking. But now every single player can run this build, and if you were to ask me what is the easiest and smoothest and best build to play in the game 100% without a doubt, I would say the Bleed Whirlwind Barbarian. So now that we got that out of the way, as far as like some of the things that have been changed here, there's also a bunch of uniques, but they're here and I can just mouse over them. So let's go over kind of what has actually been upgraded here. But I also want to go ahead and have this guide be really beginner friendly. And if you are interested in playing this, how to kind of play the build, because it doesn't activate the same as every other single build. So one thing for starters is when we push Whirlwind, we want to tap Whirlwind versus hold it down. And the reason why you want to do that is that will actually increase your DPS as we have Tyrael's Might. Now, first off, does this build function without the Uber uniques? The answer is not really. I'm gonna be straight up with you guys. I have some suggestions down below also in the build guide for things that you can replace with. There is, however, going to be a problem with your resource if you don't have Ring of the Starless Skies. Now, you can definitely play without the Tyrael's Might, but the Ring of the Starless Skies is kind of the one that you really need. Otherwise, resource problems are going to kick in and you're going to be like, what the heck? How come I don't have infinite resource like him? So that is the one bar to entry for this build as a heads up. But as far as how the build plays, you pretty much activate your Wrath of the Berserker. You keep up your shouts when you can, activate them in groups of enemies because that will help out with the cooldown. And then you basically just spam Whirlwind. If you want to hold it down, maybe your fingers are getting tired, it's totally fine. But I'm just saying for maximum DPS and to be a good, build guide creator, you want to spam it. It'll give you more damage. But you're seeing this is on PTR, which the bosses were way harder on the PTR for Pit 100. But you guys are seeing instant deletion here. Basically one of the easiest builds in the entire game. Super good because Iron Skin is so OP. I don't know what's going on with this thing, but I think that there's some sort of probably some bug with this. So fingers crossed this doesn't get nerfed somehow. Like, I don't know why the Sorceress got like crazy nerfs on their like defensive mechanic, but Barb is like, nah dude, just keep this up the whole time. Like, it is crazy how strong Barbarian is, and Iron Skin is just so good. Activate this if you see any problems start to arise. Maybe your health is dipping a little low. It's great for that. Another thing is the two-handed axe over here. So the two-handed axe over here is going to be what we run. And there is a few different things that you can try to play around with as far as the amulet. You can run Lockrun's Talisman, which is actually brand new, or you can actually just go for a regular amulet and then you have another aspect. It's up to you what you kind of want to run, as getting increased critical strike chance is still very good in the build because, well, that's going to tie to how you are dealing most of your damage, which is by applying some sort of bleed mechanic. So as far as it goes, in terms of the skills, you pretty much just activate all of them when they're up, except for Iron Skin. You activate it when there's something that goes wrong, and if you also want to have the ability to be unstoppable and you gain damage reduction on it. There's a lot of times where you can upkeep it, but if you're doing any of the brand new stuff, like this is one of the new modes that we have in Season 5. I never really needed to use it in that. I think the pit is way harder than this brand new mode, but nonetheless, they'll probably do some adjustments here. Anyways, as far as the gear goes, we are obviously running the Crown of Lucian. Every single build will be running it, so this is going to really help out with your damage. Ideally, if you can get like a specific greater affix, which one would I want to go for? I guess maximum life or resource is totally fine, but there's not really anything that's super important here to hit. And then you can see some of the other roles if you happen to not have it. There's stuff that you can kind of go for. And one thing that's going to be really nice is the resistances are going to be super cakewalk because you have the Tyrael's Might. Tyrael's Might will give you damage reduction, will let you get more damage because you're shooting out more things, and on top of that, it gives you those resistances, which is great. Now, this is where it gets brand new. You want to throw your aspect of anger management in a non-two-hander, obviously because it's just active at all times. Yeah, it would reduce the fury cost, but it doesn't really matter, like the threshold. So basically, you throw this in any of the slots except for your amulet or your two-hander. Don't put it in those departments. And then you're looking for kind of the generic stuff here. We're looking for crit strike chance, crit strike damage. Now, you do want to hit as a number is 300% at the moment for vulnerable damage, because they have nerfed this thing over here. It caps out at 45, and it's, I believe, 15%. So basically what that means, get 300 and you're done. So anything past 300 vulnerable damage is no good. And you would rather get way more crit damage as well as crit, or just strength is fine too, max life, any of those defensive stats are great. And then for our pants, we want to run the Iron Warrior aspect here. And then just looking for kind of the generic stuff. If you can get greater affix to resistance to all elements, this can actually solve your resistances really easy, because our boots over here will also give us a bunch of resistances. So we throw the Rakenos weight. These are brand new boots. They should actually say like resistances here, but basically they're going to have resistance here. We're going to have resistance here. If we get just any roll of resistances, I don't even think it needs to be greater affixes. It depends on what you roll for your Rakenos Wake's boot, but these are also pretty good because they actually grant us cooldown reduction, which really helps out because we're going to not run Bold Chieftains anymore. So if you want to run another amulet with cooldown reduction with like Cut to the Bone or whatever, that's totally fine too. But yeah, these boots are going to be huge in the next season because more cooldown reduction is always going to be great for more shouts, which means more whirlwinds shooting out, more of the little dust devils shooting out. It's going to be better. And then on top of that, we are going to be running Berserk Ripping. This is important. We want this in our two-handed. And instead of getting vulnerable damage now, again, once you reach 300, whatever thing that needs it, you also want to try to get that damage while berserking so you can max out on the Paragon board, that bonus that you get. After that, though, it's all straight into crit because you have a multiplier that has no scale limit. And then we have the Devilish aspect over here, and that was what we're going to throw in one of our weapons. And then another weapon, we are going to be wanting to run the Fierce Winds over here. And then the Grandfather for one of the Uber Uniques. If you don't have this, you can still run a pole arm. It's going to require you to put in a different glyph, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same exact build. I don't feel like there's a necessary dedicated video to the pole arm variant, but basically, yeah, you can run a pole arm. Just check out the notes. I'll write something in for the notes what you need to put in. Basically, you just run the pole arm. And then also, we do need to remove Bold Chieftains and throw in the Dust Devils aspect. The other option is to run that in the amulet, and on the amulet you'd want to run crit. For generic stuff, as far as it goes, you'd want crit. You would also want to go ahead and throw in cooldown reduction or any ranks to, again, some sort of passives that would give you some sort of more damage. The other thing that we really need is Ring of the Starless Skies. If you don't have this, this build will not function correct because you need to have the amount of resource cost reduction. Otherwise, no resource equals no spinning equals no damage equals, well, you're dead. So basically, this is your bar to entry for the build. Now, in theory, you could play other things. You can run other things that will give you some sort of resource gen, like you can run a ring that would give you technically more resources while your shouts are up. That is technically there, but this is mainly going to be designed as an endgame build, so yeah. But again, you could overcome the hurdle in other ways, but it's not going to feel as good. Just get this. It's fine. It is the only Uber Unique that I would say you really need for this build to run. Now, without Tyraels, the build can still run. In fact, there is another variant which you can play the Rage Armor, which I'll put in the notes. That is another great option. And then, as far as gems go, we want emeralds, rubies, and then diamonds. Basically the same exact thing. Before, you would maybe throw in sapphires to get extra vulnerable, but at this point, because we have a cap now, well, this one's just going to be the better option. And then, as far as the skill tree, let's go ahead and hop right into that. So, as far as the skill tree goes, the first 2 points do not matter. We'll make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it here. So the first 2 skill points, again, do not matter. And then we actually don't want to put pressure points, so that way we don't have to throw in a Curse Touch. Just another source of vulnerability. You can also get this on one of the rolls on your rings. So on the ring, I put it over here where we have, like, chance to make enemies vulnerable. That's great, too. You can also get the damage while berserking, Warcry, cooldown reduction. Those are all great stats to have. But just some sort of source of vulnerable is just kind of better. And on top of that, Whirlwind actually activates faster when you actually get more attack speed. So with a Lachlan's Talisman, more crit strike, a chance and more crit damage, and we also get attack speed. So that kind of helps out, actually. It's a small little buff. Even though Whirlwind technically doesn't deal damage, we're still getting more activations of potentially our lucky hit chances. So pressure points over there just to apply vulnerability. Your standard martial vigor, imposing presence. Then we're going to put some points in iron skin. And then also challenging shell. You can remove this one if you want to, but it's okay to throw in as well. We also have war cry over here. And then obviously booming voice. You can run raid leader, and then we get extra damage reduction while berserking. And then we have over here, so we get no mercy, and then we get more damage reduction. If you want to put points in defensive stance, that's okay. Cut to the bone is always great. And then we have heavy-handed, so that's why you will want to actually make sure you select your grandfather or whatever two-handed weapon that you're using for this, and that way you get extra crit strike damage. And then Wrath of the Berserker, and then we are running Gushing Wounds here, because for whatever reason, all the other builds in Diablo, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little salty that like there's so many things that got capped on, especially on the Sorceress, which was really weak, but they said a Barbarian, hey, you get a slip. No problem with Gushing Wounds, just making this just one of the most OP things in the game. I think eventually they may have to just nerf this. I mean, the fact that you have this crazy number that doesn't have a cap, while all the other classes, well, there's like, 20% extra damage. With this one, just go to the moon. Like, just go and put in however many points you want. All right, there's another note over here that the Twister, because this is a frequently asked question, why don't I play it? Well, it doesn't work. It still doesn't work. They didn't mention that they're actually fixing the skill, because it literally is broken. And in fact, there's actually more discoveries I just recently learned from the Barb, where some of the other things aren't working properly for specifically some of the bleed stuff. So I'll update you guys if there is a change, but Twister still does not work. It's just a broken, like this. It's just, unfortunately, man, I'm just going to be straight with you guys. Diablo 4 has had a really rough start, but they are slowly fixing these things, but the Twister glyph does not work. Do not play it. Starter board, exploit. And then the next board over here, we will be running Carnage and Might. And then we're going to be running Blood Rage Marshal. And then we go to Bone Breaker Wrath. And then we go into the Warbringer Ire. And then we go into the Decimator Disembowel. And then we go into Hemorrhage over here for the very final one. And man, is this build absolutely amazing. It is so incredibly smooth to play. I could not recommend this build more than any other build in Diablo for a beginner that really wants to take their skills to the next level by playing one of the most OP classes. And it is the smoothest build to play because, well, a lot of times you have that iron skin to prevent yourself from getting hit by something. It has incredible like open world clear speed because you have all these little bolts shooting out. It is just, in my personal opinion, it is absolutely one of the top tier builds to play. While I will admit it doesn't have the highest boss DPS like a Flay or an Andariel's Rogue, this build is by far the most recommended build that I can give to any player in the game for the smoothest experience to level up in the pit. But it's probably still going to be good also in the brand new Infernal Hordes mode, as, I mean, it's just spawning waves of enemies, and once they buff this area and make it more challenging, it'll still probably be good because Barbarian is also incredibly tanky. So very forgiving, very, very high damage, and now it's even easier to play because the bar to entry before was getting your cooldown enough to make it so you can constantly have this berserking, but now they basically said, hey, we nerfed it a little bit, but we also gave it this, and this just makes it super OP. But anyways, that's gonna wrap it up. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new, hit subscribe, turn that bell so you don't miss out when we cover even more build guides and more stuff. And I'll update you guys if there is any change, but in Season 5, this build will absolutely be dominating.